Out there, it's really raining. And yes, I know the camera lighting isn't the best. But anyway, question I get time and time again is when do you think World War III is going to kick off as a recognizable hot war? I get that one all the time. Official answer is I don't know. A lot of people say, oh, okay, right now there's people saying, oh, we're going to have thermonuclear war by October 8th. Well, we're the 7th, so that means tomorrow. So hopefully you get to see this video. I don't do dates and times because it's not that cut and dry. There's a lot of things that are happening. It's going to happen when it happens. There's a lot of people that don't believe it's going to happen at all. And a lot of people that watch are like, Reg, I watch and I like what you have to say. And I've heard this several times from several different people. And I find it interesting, but I don't think it'll ever, that, they'll always say, and I know that they're never going to do it. Cooler heads are going to prevail. But then again, when you look at the lunatics out there, you just have to take a few things into consideration. Number one, how psychopathic they are. Number two, their understanding of thermonuclear weapons is completely, it's delusions of grandeur. They think, okay, yeah, you see a mushroom cloud, you've got victory. They don't understand the devastation after. And really, we have a good idea what will happen in a thermonuclear war, but we don't really know what the true after effects are. Like, we have an idea from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but we don't know, how fast it will kill off biodiversity in all areas. So even areas that are not irradiated might still suffer just from whatever. And radiation is cumulative, so that means it's going to be transferred by the weather, it's going to be transferred by animals, it's going to be transferred by all kinds of stuff. We know things will survive, but it's going to be a meek existence for a lot that does. But the thing is that, yes, these people are crazy enough, I think they would do it. They are genocidal enough, they will do it. Because this idea, right now what you're seeing isn't a miscalculation. These people are pushing, John Kerry and all these generals. And you have generals in the United States that are, some are, you have that Kennedy guy or whatever. He can't wait. This guy's frothing at the mouth to go to war with Russia. These are the type of people that call you coward if you don't want to go and die for these bankers' wars. They're real idiots. I get it. Some of them are that hardcore that they, war is what they want. They're, and you have to look at how often the United States goes to war. It's at war all the time. It's been at war steadily since World War II. It pretty much never stops. And definitely since Vietnam, it's been non-stop whatsoever. There's been no stop whatsoever. So people looking at this, you have to understand their willingness to go to war is not even in question. They have a death and debt-based economy in the States. Take the democracy JDAMs. Take our currency or you get democracy JDAMs and regime change and all that stuff. So that's pretty much self-evident. You don't even have to go too much into depth on that one. So the willingness to get into war is not even questioned. The United States is always looking for war. That's why they're in Syria. That's why they're in Libya. They went looking for it. Nobody called them to come over. They just went looking for it. The Ukraine, that type of thing, they're not really in there yet, but they're getting in there, that type of thing. Iraq, again, nobody was calling to go to war with Iraq other than the government. The civilians weren't saying we have to go to war with Iraq. They went along with it because they got duped into it with weapons of mass destruction. And somehow, Bin Laden who escaped to Pakistan, but we're going to go to war in Iraq, that type of thing. But anyway, I digress. But all those lies are getting exposed now, and it's getting to the point where it's just the emperor has no clothes. People see it for what it is. And they're getting more desperate. They're talking about a no-fly zone in Syria, which means they're going to be trying to shoot down Russian airplanes. The Russians have already responded saying, we're not going to tolerate U.S. mistakes. If you come in to strike us, if we don't know where those bombs are going to be falling, we're going to take you out. And we're not going to, once those missiles are fired, we ain't calling them back. So the Russians have pretty much, they've drawn their line in the sand, and they will shoot down NATO airplanes. I think they're going to do it on purpose. They're going to probably even pick an incident where the NATO airplane is just innocently flying and it has no threat to them whatsoever, and they're going to shoot it down on purpose. Say, well, you were too close to our area, and we thought you were attacking. Even if it's going to be bullshit, they're going to do it to call the bluff. That's what the Russians do. They again, that win big, lose big. Like I say, the Chinese, if they take a gamble, it's usually 50-50. If they win everything. If they don't win, well, they don't lose much. With the Russians, it's different. If they take that same gamble. If they win the table. If they lose an arm. That type of thing. So the Russians will play Putin will play the crazy man at some point to get the world's attention. And trust me, one thing you won't get with Russia is, you got the odd guy that's the Yahoo out there that, we're going to kick Russia's ass so fast, like this general, and I bet you this guy, again, granted, I'm not a soldier, I never served, but I bet you this guy's never saw combat, you know what I mean? So he probably doesn't even understand that it's not that cut and dry. You don't just come in and kick everybody's ass, you get your ass kicked too. Again, nobody thought, the Syrian regime would have fell without the Russian help, but they're hanging on pretty darn well. Think about the weaponry that's being used in Syria. It's American-made anti-tank weapons. Yes, the training isn't as good for the jihadis. Yes, the Americans and the Egyptians and the Qataris and the Mossad and the Israelis and the U.S. is all training up these jihadists to use these weapons properly. But even at that, which these TOW missiles are more advanced than the anti-tank missiles that the Syrians are using for the most part. They do have a handful of Hornets, but for the most part they're using RPG-7s and stuff like that. They're still riding around predominantly in T-55 and T-72 tanks, and the older versions of them. They're not in the fully modernized versions of them, which I don't think there's any real modernized T-55s, but you get the idea. So the Syrian army is still going around with 1950s, 1960s, 1970s technology, and up against state-of-the-art anti-tank weapons and stuff like that, and they're still making, their tactics are still, don't kid yourself, the Syrians are taking massive losses, but Aleppo is going to fall into the hands of the Syrian Arab Army. There's no doubt about that. And the United States is looking at this, and the world bankers are looking at this. If Aleppo Aleppo's already fallen, but if Aleppo is retaken, it's pretty much game over in Syria because there's no place for the rebels to really be of any effect. At that point, the Syrian army will just go from town to town and clear them out. I think Bashar al-Assad was right. The victory in Syria is only a few months away. They just can't. The rebels can't hang on, and those guys are going to flood back into Israel. They're going to flood back into Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and they're just going to destabilize there. Why? Mercenaries get cranky when you don't pay them, and legitimate jihadists have been following that crusade for 1,500 years. They like to fight. They're not going to give up. Now that said, pushing a no-fly zone, it looks like the United States is going there. You have some people coming out saying, asking, on Russia Today, they're asking, like some of the State Department guys, are you guys going to actually do a no-fly zone? You know what that means, right? That means war with Russia. And they're like, well, war with Russia, we understand that. It's in nobody's interest. But that's the guy that's giving the press conference. It's the people up at the top. Kerry is talking about a no-fly zone in Syria. And how they're doing it right now, they're asking the Russians, well, how about you ground your airplanes so we can have our no-fly zone? But what does a no-fly zone look like? It looks like Libya. It looks like Iraq. That's what it looks like. The Russians are saying, no way. It's so exposed now. The United States is basically directly backing Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, ISIS. It's all direct because they're, well, we can't tell. We're only backing the good guys, but we can't tell who the good guys are. Well, then you're backing the bad guys too. And it's only to overthrow Assad. That's all that's important. The people aren't important there. The women and children, it's not about that. The refugee crisis wouldn't happen if the United States didn't do regime change using George Soros money. And the White Helmets, again, George Soros, millions and millions of dollars going in on them. So this is the lead up to it. It's going to happen. Is it going to happen today, tomorrow, 2 years from now, 10 years from now? I don't know. People like Joe Scalzo said that they're all in on it together and they're going to have the war around 2023, 2024. That's a possibility. But you never know. You never know. If the Americans are trying to dupe the Russians into firing first so that they can get World War III going, okay. And the mainstream media, this is the problem with the mainstream media. This is why we got to get people now so that when the mainstream media starts blaming, oh no, Russia just attacked us out of nowhere. It's like a new Pearl Harbor type of thing. They just attacked us out of nowhere. They just started shooting down our planes for no reason or Israeli airplanes for no reason. Well, all the lead up to is what you have to look at. No, it's provoke, provoke, provoke. That's all the U.S. government does is provoke everybody into war. Now, the Russians at some point are going to respond, but I think because the Russians know that's what the U.S. wants, The Russians don't want war. If they wanted war, we would have been at war already. They don't want war. And then people say, yeah, but it's not. They're not ready yet. I don't think it's going to work like that. They don't want war. They just don't want war. The Russian scientists, like in World War II, will make it to America. The weapons guys, they'll make it to America. The space guys, they'll make it to America, just like the Nazis did. There's no difference. There's no difference there. Whereas if you were looking at, okay, well, that regime was war crimes, von Braun should have been put in a firing squad. Yes, he was brilliant. He was a rocketeer, and he's gave the birth to NASA and stuff like that. Sure, but he was technically the enemy, and created weapons of mass destruction, the V1, V2 rockets, etc. He should have been by law, maritime law, or rules of law of whatever of military law. He should have been put into the firing squad. It's like what Hillary Clinton's doing with this weapons dealer right now, and Barack Obama, the weapons dealer that was supplying all the weapons to Libya. The Department of Justice, which once again, the Department of Justice, running defense for the Clintons and Obamas, dropped the charges saying, we're not going to charge him. We'll just make sure he doesn't sell weapons to anybody for the next 4 years. That's his punishment. Because it goes right back on the government. This is why, again, it's the reason why we're going to war, is with the Donald Trump thing, it's like the desperation is setting in, because if this guy is the real deal, which I'm having a hunch that he is, and I know, yes, there are questions, his loyalty to the Israeli lobby and stuff like that. I get that, but that's pretty much any politician that wants to get elected is going to say that anyway. It's only after they're elected whether you find out they were a fake or you were the real deal. But one thing I will say is that if he gets into power and starts going after the world elites, once Hillary Clinton goes to jail, well, they'll kill her before she goes to jail. The Rothschild, Rockefellers. Trust me, you have the Lady de Rothschild out there just screaming to the high heavens how we got to elect Hillary Clinton, giving billions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, Soros giving billions of dollars. These people are all in it together. So is the media moguls. There's so many people, and the Department of Justice. There's a lot of people that are going to go to jail that aren't going to be getting this passed. Like all these people for Hillary Clinton, that they're saying, well, if you testify, we'll give you immunity. What they should be doing is, no, we're going to take you down. You don't give anybody immunity. Oh yeah, but then we can't testify. Yeah, but here's the deal. And it's the same with the drug dealers and everything like that. They catch the pusher, okay, on the street. And they say, if you give me up the big guy, you'll get immunity and we'll put you in the witness protection and you can go hide somewhere. And sometimes they'll tell you something, sometimes they won't. But if you say, you know what, no, you're the first guy, we don't care about the big guy, we want you. We're going to ruin your life, not theirs. They might not say anything, you would think, but I think it's the absolute opposite. Tell us what you know now or we're going to charge you. And trust me, they're going to sing. They're going to sing like crazy. It's not even immunity at that point. It's immune from prosecution. But these people, they all have to be held accountable, even the low-level people. You start making examples like that, you'll get so many whistleblowers that you won't even need to arrest people. They'll just come forward saying, look, I don't want to have any part of this. I know it's criminal, but I feared for my life. They'll come up with whatever. Okay, oh yeah, well, we believe you. Just tell us the truth, and then we can arrest this person, that person. The amount of politicians and stuff that need to go to jail is like, how did these people get so corrupt? Like, it's just weird how that. But I guess if the system is corrupt to begin with, it just breeds it. I don't know. It just seems like anybody that touches the government becomes toxic. I don't know why that is. But I think that has a lot to do with people not, people falling asleep on the wall. That's the problem. Now, that said, I think this paints a picture of where we're at. The desperation is there. A war, when all else fails, we have to go to war, according to the bankers. They're all talking about it. They're all, we're at the most intense time in history, even more than that of the the Cuban Missile Crisis. A lot of people don't even realize what they're looking at. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a handful of boats bringing missiles into Cuba. It was on the open ocean. You could see them coming. You knew they were coming for weeks. And there was dialogue between Kennedy and Khrushchev, right? Right now, we're at a point where there's no dialogue with Russia whatsoever. So if a war breaks out, there's not pick up the red phone and, hey, Russia, well, let's call this up. Whoa, let's talk. That doesn't exist. When this goes hot, it's all in. It's all in. That's the scary part. Why? Because they've broken off talks. They've broken off diplomatic, they've shut down the embassies. There's no dialogue with Russia. barely any with China. So that in itself is just, a dangerous time. At a time when they're talking about having a no-fly zone, begging Russia, just we're going to do this no-fly zone. The U.S. is going to do the no-fly zone no matter what. The Russians aren't going to tolerate it. And I think what will probably happen is the Russians will probably shoot down a squadron of coalition jets and say, it's your move. We're not giving up Syria. Russia has just come out and said, you know what? We're not leaving. We're not leaving until the job's done or until we're kicked out by the government. But Assad has to go. Assad has to go. Why does Assad have to go? Oh, well, he uses barrel bombs. All the U.S. talking about, State Department talking about bombing hospitals and stuff. I mean, they've bombed more hospitals than anybody. I'm not saying the Russians are saints on this. Of course, they're probably. You cannot just look at the weapons they're dropping. They clear like 5 city blocks. Like these FOB fuel air bombs are just, the thermobaric bombs and the TOS-1 missiles, the T-72 flamethrower there with the 24 thermobaric rockets. That thing takes out 8 city blocks. That thing's not even the size of a school bus. You know what I mean? It's just brutal weaponry that's used. Of course it's going to kill civilians. But these civilians wouldn't be dying had the war not started in the first place because of the Greater Israel Project and U.S. foreign policy, which is Israeli foreign policy. A lot of people don't understand it goes back to them. All wars are bankers' wars. All wars are in the Middle East are pretty much Israeli wars. Follow the money, you figure it out. But if you understand 2 things to look into is the Samson option, and then tell me if you're willing to die for the Israelis, and the Greater Israel Project. Once you understand those 2 things, everything we're looking at, like Obama didn't lose control in Libya, he didn't lose control in Syria. This is exactly what they want. These are Hillary Clinton policies. Hillary Clinton is twice the war hawk, and her rhetoric of going to war with Russia and China is just astronomically terrifying. Mainstream media won't cover it. So it's just one of those things that when you look at it for what it is, it's like the recipe is there. We just have to turn on the stove. So the Russians know this. The Russians, they will stand their ground. They're doing everything to saber rattle to get the world's attention. That's why they're flying their bombers beside airliners. So people talk about it. They're like, why are the Russians bombers flying so close to the airliners? Why are they doing that? They're making their presence known. Putin has said it best. He's begged. He's pleaded. He's been trying to, he's been saying since 2010, like, call off your dogs. Don't surround Russia with missile systems. Don't put us in an undefendable position. We will have to respond with preemptive strike, and they reserve the right to do so. Khrushchev's law, I call it Khrushchev's law, where they came up during the first Cold War when they actually had relatively sane people, basically saying, okay, if Russia is going to be imminently attacked, we're not going to. Again, they saw Operation Barbarossa. And again, the Russians are paranoid. Their government is paranoid enough as it is. And the history of Russia shows that they've been attacked enough time that it's kind of justified. Under Operation Barbarossa, Hitler told Stalin, don't worry about it, it's just a drill. It's just a drill. Well, it was a drill until it wasn't. Even the Israelis do this as well. They saw the Egyptians and the Syrians back in the October War, the 67 war, the 73 war or whatever, building up on the Suez Canal and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, well, it's like, it's just a drill, it's just a drill. And then all of a sudden it wasn't a drill, and the war was on. So they have a contingency plan too. So the Russians, again, they know that they can't trust NATO, they can't trust that stuff. That's why they've been modernizing their military, which is about 70% modernized now. Are they, is the Russian military more advanced than the United States military? I think they're pretty much on par, to be honest with you. Like, I watch how these people train, and this is something that, if you're a soldier, you should be looking at what weapons you're going to be fighting, and stuff like that. And I find sometimes military training doctrines don't get into the details of they'll say, well, this is a Sukhoi. This is their frontline fighter. It does this, it does this, it does this. Here's its range, here's its this. But they don't talk, and they talk about, here's some of the tactics they might do. Okay, they get into depth a bit. But they don't get into depth on, okay, that jet's going to be working with the, that jet's going to detect you, but it's going to be the surface-to-air system that they're going to relay the information to that's going to shoot you down. So watch out for that. Don't keep your eye on that. It's a sleight of hand that they're going to do to you. Their tactics is what's going to get you. And this is all sides, all militaries. But the Russians, they've been doubling down on studying, what the weak points of the United States are. And this is what this general has recently talked about. And he was saying, the Russians and the Iranians and stuff have been exploiting our weak points. Well, right there, that tells you that you're not completely defeatable or undefeatable. And this is the problem I think some of these generals have, that they think they're, they all want to be blood and guts Patton, right? And stuff like that. And so, some of these generals are really good. There's no doubt about that. And some of them have actually faced combat in Vietnam and stuff like that. So they understand what it means to send people to war, that type of thing. But some of them also, too, are that kind of, they're belligerent. They're not confident. They're belligerent. I guess it runs in the breed or whatever that, it's for the government, so the government's good all the time. There's, these guys have no loyalty whatsoever to their own conscience. They're only loyal to whatever the regime tells them to do. So these guys, they're loyal to Obama today. Tomorrow they're loyal to Clinton. And the day after they're loyal to Rand Paul. Whoever gives them orders, that's where they go. And that's kind of fine to a degree, as long as you have oversight on the buffer zone between the war hawks in Washington and the generals, because it's the guys in between that says, okay, whoa, no, you can or cannot go to war. Which right now, Libya is an illegal war. Syria is an illegal war. Why Canada's in here? Why we're in there? We have nowhere to be. Oh, we're fighting terrorism, but we're clearly not. We're arming the terrorists. We're not. We're training the terrorists. We're arming the terrorists. We call them moderate rebels, but they're terrorists. And it's even getting to the point where on the mainstream media, they're kind of having a hard time when it comes to Syria. When they get analysts on, I'm noticing it here on the CBC, because the CBC is like our only propaganda channel that we have for news, right? Everything else is an umbrella corporation under the CBC, like CHRO, CTV, et cetera, et cetera. So they all report the same thing. You can flick a channel and you'll get the same, different newscasters, almost word for word, mocking mainstream media, right? But even at that, when they start talking about Syria, they're getting a hard time getting people that are saying, well, the U.S. is basically arming the moderate rebels, which are intertwined with the ISIS guys, so they change the name, that type of thing. And that's what they do. They just change the name and they're calling them something else now. It's like, but it's still ISIS. It's Al Qaeda at the at the long end of the stick. You know what I mean? And they keep doing that, and people are catching on to it. And the media is having a hard time trying to spin it so that the United States is looking good on this. Even and this is the medias that are actually in favor of the system. They have no choice but to make them try to look good. But it's like people looking at it and saying, well, yeah, but they're telling the Russians to have a no-fly zone when they've been invited into Syria. Yes, they're going to back Bashar al-Assad. They've said that right from the day one. Really, the Russians didn't need to get in there on the face of it. But on behind the scenes, you have to understand this war in Syria is a war against Russia and China. It's more about them than it is about the Syrians. The Syrians are just the poor bastards where they picked to do the conflict. It has to do with pipelines and has a lot to do with the petrodollar. And as I said, when Syria is stabilized, the surrounding regions will be destabilized. And even John Kerry said it himself. If we don't take Syria, the petrodollar will fall. One thing I like about Kerry is when he makes a stupid comment, or same with Joe Biden. These guys, it's like, I'm playing cards. Here's the cards I have. This is the cards I'm playing with. They do that a lot. And a lot of times when they do that, it's like they show their hand of why they're so desperate. Like, really getting rid of Assad is not the issue. It's they need to put in their puppet government. That's what they need to do. It's not working in Libya. The puppet government in Libya isn't working. It's not working out for them at all. And this is creating the problem that once people stop using the petrodollar and stop putting their resources in the petrodollar, and of course they're going to do it if you've been bombing their countries. There's no reason for the Syrians to ever use the American dollar, ever. Why would they? Why would they want to support the country that's bombed the shit out of their country, armed terrorists, everything like that? No, of course they're not. That said, neighboring countries will eventually follow suit. We are seeing that breakdown, like I said a couple of years ago. Watch for the Russians to start arming South America, and they have, that type of thing. And we see all this buildup. Obviously, the African countries are China-friendly more than U.S.-friendly. That's why you got Boko Haram, again, armed by the United States, supplied by the United Nations. These white helmets, George Soros' white helmets, pretty much are the jihadists with white helmets on. they're running around yelling, Dirk, Dirk, Allah Akbar, with the jihadis and, this is how crazy it is. They get a guy, okay, some Syrian rebels, shoot him. The white helmets come in, put him in a freaking thing. They run in there as like they're a medical team or something. They help the guy. They put him in the body bag and they pull him away. It's so bizarre. Like it's horrible, but it's like so. It's like, and these are supposed to be your rescue workers, and oh my god. And of course, who are they funded by? George Soros. Over there in China, you got radical Islamists being funded once again by George Soros. This guy, everywhere his money goes, death and destruction follows. And they have to double down now because the Russians are basically calling the bluff, so are the Chinese. Now, the Chinese are more covert than even the Russians. It's just the Russians are in the light because they're in Syria, but they're all over the place. Now, the problem is at some point, push is going to come to shove, and which we'll get into the meat and potatoes of what this video is about. The second question I get asked all the time is, where are the nukes going to rain down on? Where are they going to hit? Well, first off, every major capital is going to get hit. Now, whether this doctrine is true or not, I don't know because I saw it in a movie. If you want to see a good movie, it's called By Dawn's Early Light. It's old, but it's an excellent, excellent movie. There's a little bit of kind of whatever in it that no, a B-52 pilot would not turn around. You know what I mean? Once those guys are in the air, they're going to clear 10-mile strips. And if they're carrying as many nukes as the plane can carry, they're going to clear a country, or maybe a couple of countries. It is a flying fortress, right? Strato fortress, right? So the thing about that is once those B-52s that leave, it's game on. The stealth, okay, the B-1s and B-2s are one thing. Because those things, the B-1s, B-2s are going to go after the really tricky targets. Dropping the nukes on military facilities, that type of thing. That's where the B-2s are going to go. The B-1s are going to go in to take out radar systems and stuff like that, jam electronics, surface-to-air missiles. That's what those things are really going to go after. The B-52s are going to destroy countries. They will destroy, once the air defenses are down, they're daisy cutters and B-61 nukes just going to be dropping, raining down on all the coastal, for the Chinese, it's basically all the harbors, all the ports. They'll take out all that. The major cities, they'll take out as many of those. The Americans will bomb cities. They're going to kill a lot of people. That's the point of this war is genocide, right? So they're going to kill a lot of people. The Lancers are going to go after the military stuff because those things are a lot faster. They can fly, supersonic, off the deck type of thing. The B-2s, or the B-1s, that's the B-1s. The B-2s are going to basically, mind you, they're going to have escorts and stuff like that too. But those things are going to go after bunkers. They're going to go after high-value targets, naval yards, missile silos, etc., etc. They're going to go after those type of things, ships, that type of thing, all the military stuff. That's what those stealth are going to be. I don't think they're going to be successful fully. A lot of them are going to get shot down, and there's only a handful of them. So the B-52s is the backbone. Will they have all 1,500 B-52s in the air at once? No, because there's only a handful of them left flying. But I can guarantee you right now, B-52s, if I had a hunch, if they're talking about a no-fly zone in Syria against the Russians, the Syrian Air Force is nothing. Like the Americans will take out the Syrian Air Force. They're flying MiG-23s and MiG-21s and a handful of new MiG-29s. Not much different than Saddam's Air Force, except for the newer MiG-29s are new. And they will be formidable in the sense that those pilots are probably the best trained pilots. Chances are there's probably Russian pilots flying them, kind of like what they were worried about North Korea, shooting down Russian pilots, flying on behalf of North Korea. Which they did. The Russians didn't admit it till about 1980s, but we were in there. We were flying, because the Korean pilots weren't good enough yet. But once the Korean pilots were to the standard, then it's the same like the Syrian pilots. Once the Russians have been training up the Syrian army like crazy, that's why they're getting so much ground. The Syrian army wasn't an army that you would even really consider an army in 2010 when this war broke out. But now they're trained up. They're trained up by the Russians. That's why they're making such great grounds, because they're now, you might as well say, Syrian Spetsnaz. They're becoming that. It gets... I'm just going to let my dog out. Need to go out? You want to go outside? It's raining out there. But it gets to where we're at. That the bombers, that's what they're going to hit. Now, the first wave is probably going to be the ICBMs. The ICBMs will take to the air, from any country that has them, because you're only going to get one chance to launch. And it's launch everything, because the silos will pretty much target mostly the Midwest USA, where most of the nuke ICBM, the Minuteman missiles are, and stuff like that. So if you're near those bases, those areas are going to be heavily irradiated. And you got about 450 silos, so that's about 450 plus warheads, maybe more, that are going to be going into those regions, guaranteed. So the mid-USA is gone. The eastern seaboard and the western seaboard, like Norfolk and all that stuff gets hit right away. The Navy yards, they definitely get hit. Other things that get hit, but not by nukes, but by cruise missiles, will be like Lockheed Martin's facility, Boeing's facility, Northrop, if they're even still around, Grumman. I think they got bought up by Lockheed. General Dynamics, all those guys, those facilities get hit by cruise missiles. Not necessarily, maybe they might drop nukes on it. Power stations, power grids, cruise missiles. That's, again, is going to be the role of the Lancers. That'll also be the role of, say, the Tu-22Ms. Those things are pretty much the Russian counterpart to the B-1 Lancer, and the roles will be similar. However, the Tu-22s, they will most likely be doing electronic warfare as well, but they will probably be escorted with Su-24s, Su-24s and Su-34s, which will be more going after like SAM sites, stuff like that, the air defense. They're a little more nimble, they're a little more, so that's what that's going to be used for. Up high flying air defense will be a MiG-31 at probably 80,000 feet at Mach 3. And they can come in as a strike fighter bomber if they want, but they'll probably be more like air defense for the Lancers and that. The Tu-160s, they'll stay. They won't even come over the island, so to speak. They won't be coming over the United States. They're going to be off the coast. Same with the Tupolev Bears. They're just going to let the cruise missiles do the work. Some of these cruise missiles will have nuclear warheads on them. It depends on what the Russians would want to keep after. A power station, okay, you don't need to nuke it. You know, Hoover Dam, you might need to nuke it. You know, that type of thing. So the power grids are going to go down everywhere right away. The satellites, that's simultaneously, missiles will be launched at satellites to take out the satellites as quickly as possible. Within 2 weeks, there is no high-tech stuff left, if that's the way it is. So every major city in every country will be hit. All the military installations will be hit. But whether they're hit by cruise missile or nukes, all the major Air Force bases will be hit by nukes. Why? It's not so much that one nuke will take out an entire Air Force, like Edwards Air Force Base. You could drop the biggest nuke on the planet at one end of the base. It's probably not going to take out the whole base. However, no one's going to be able to go near it because of the radiation. Now, they say thermonuclear weapons burn a lot cleaner than what the atomic weapons did, but it's still going to be irradiated. You're not going to be able to go near that for the next 10,000 years, 25,000 years, whatever it is. And I think I'm going to have to light a fire. Getting kind of chilly. Damn, eh? Dad's just as a side note, my dad's out moose hunting. This is day one of it. Him and Wild Tony are out there moose hunting. I hope they get a moose. But I can imagine they're pretty cold and damp right now. But for moose, it's worth it. So anyway, sorry, getting back. It's been on my mind. I'm like, oh, did my dad get a moose yet? Did he get a moose yet? He left me yesterday. He's like, did he get a moose yet? Yeah. No, I'm not excited. So that's what's going to be hit. So the bombers are going to be the ones bringing in the nukes. The ICBMs, well, those things are going to be launched right away because it's basically launch the missile, get out of the silo because there's going to be an incoming warhead in 15 to 20 minutes. And the birds are just going to pass each other in the air, right? So this is where the United States, right now, the United States is about to spend, I forget how, $3 or $4 trillion upgrading its nuclear arsenal. It's at this case in point in time, it is so far behind the Russians. Like every Russian missile has 10 warheads minimum, pretty much. Almost all their cruise missiles can be outfitted with nuclear warheads, variable yield, that type of thing. So, and I'm pretty sure nobody's going to put the yields on the minimum. The B-61 has a variable yield warhead. No one's going to put them on the minimum. They're not going to care about the civilian casualties. Put them max power. North Korea with a variable yield warhead. Why? They don't care about civilians. They're going to just put everything on max. You know what I mean? And unless they actually want to save something. So that's pretty much the main areas So if you're close to a military base, that base is going to get hit. Which bases will be priority? Well, runways are going to be priority over, say, barracks. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. But it all gets hit. It all gets hit. It's the supply stuff. Other thing is fuel. Nuclear power plants probably won't be hit. You would think, well, it causes more destruction, but they don't need to hit it. And again, you have to understand, whoever does win the war, so to speak. I mean, in this point, it's a winner take all. There's not going to be, okay, we call the ceasefire now, and you can pick up the pieces here, and you can pick up the. No, this is an all or none war. This is, if we are winning, we're going to, anybody that survives on your side, we're killing them off, so we never have to fight you again. That type of thing. That's what we have to look forward to. So when the Russians and the Chinese are coming over the hill, shoot to kill, because they aren't going to leave anybody alive. There's not going to be, okay, well, we're at the ceasefire now. No. The Russians are not going to let this one go. If the United States starts war with Russia, and they're looking at it right now, they have started a war with Russia. We're at war with Russia. And China, to maybe a slightly lesser degree, but not by much. The thing is, the Chinese thing is you have to be right in their backyard to go to war with them. The Russians, they're pretty much going to be everywhere. That's one of the things they have an advantage. The Russians have mobility that the Chinese don't, but supported by the Chinese. Look at China and Russia in World War III become a giant superstate. What gets hit in Russia? Well, the funny thing about Russia is, for such a big country, it's a lot like Canada, where there's only a handful of cities, and that's where the majority of people live, in the south end of the country. But the thing is they've got tons of military bases all over China, all over Russia, like you wouldn't believe. China, yes, too, but not like the degree that Russia does. So, same thing, shipping yards, all major cities, Moscow will be nuked, that type of thing. Anything, radar installation, runways. The difference is all the silos will get hit by the Russians, but the Russians are starting to kind of, they're still using silos, but they're getting to the point where the missile silos have kind of become obsolete, because they can be taken out in a preemptive strike, and you won't get a chance to launch. That's why they like Topol-M. Topol-M is a nuclear missile with wheels, and there's nothing really like that on the planet. Maybe that's for the better, but other than Topol-M. But at some point, yes, the United States is going to have to build their own Topol-Ms. The Chinese have kind of got their version of a Topol-M. It's the slightly older variant, an older variant of Topol-M, so to speak. Scud Launcher Supreme, I guess you would say. And they've got it, but they're not, again, they've got lots of them too. The Chinese have these about 5,000 miles of underground tunnel where all their nukes are, going in and out of. And they've been preparing that thing like crazy as a fallout shelter and everything like that. And these mobile missile launchers, you can't preemptively strike them because they're so far underground, there's no modern weaponry capable of getting to them. So these things can come out, launch, and go back in, reload, and launch again. The Russians have Yamata, basically known as something like Evil Mountain. And it's, again, they've got everything they need in there, not so much to fight a war, but after a war to defend the country. So they've got fighter jets in there. Now, some of the footage you see in there's like old MiG-15s and stuff like that sitting in there. No, they've got MiG-29s, Su-27s. They've got, T-90 tanks in there. They got all the modern stuff in there, and probably everything to maintain that stuff for years and years to come. Now, that said, the missile silos, again, is the first wave. Second wave is like Air Force stuff that, goes out and hits here, there, and everywhere. Again, top priority. Power stations will be taken out mostly. Again, they're not worth a nuke. Cruise missiles, fine. Major cities would be nuked. The runways, the shipping ports, trade ports, rail systems, all that stuff gets probably taken out more by conventional bombs, but that's the stuff that's on any means of making war. Fuel refineries, very top priority. That's probably why they pump so much oil that they're all sitting in oil freighters everywhere. Oil freighters will be torpedo fests on those things, regardless of whose nation. Why? Because, again, it's unlike World War II, where you had like 30,000 ships at sea at once. You don't have that now. You've got about 400 submarines planet-wide in active duty, maybe give or take, maybe 500, whatever. But that said, most of the submarines are old. But that said, the newer stuff, like coming from Russia, and stuff like that. The submarine fleet of Russia is going to be a very formidable foe, and that's the last stage of the thermonuclear war, which this whole thing is going to play out within an hour and a half max. The quickest nuclear weapons, and some people ask me, well, whose missiles are faster, ours or theirs? It doesn't matter. Once they're launched, it doesn't matter if it takes 15 minutes or half an hour for the missile to get here. You know, the slow missiles are half an hour, the fast missiles are 15 minutes. It is what it is. It's the idea that we go back to the Stone Age in an hour and a half. That's the big one. But the submarines, they surface last for the counterstrike. So the ICBMs fire. They fire at like all the priority targets. Exactly what's going to get hit. Again, every major capital gets hit. I think they give, don't quote me on this, but I think they give enough warning to the other side to get their big wigs out of the area, and then they launch. But I don't know, that was the protocol. Doesn't mean they're going to follow through on it. I think if the Russians launch, they're not going to warn anybody. They're just going to launch. The drill that they did, yes, that drill that they did with the 40 million people, and they have enough room for 12 million people in their shelters. So they can start a population over again very easy with 12 million people. You can have basically a non-interbred, basically, if you have 10,000 to 40,000 people, you could have a population that can sustain itself without you know, if it was 50-50 men and women type of thing. That it won't be inbred, that type of thing. So you can do that with that little of people. So 12 million, they'll start a population again, no problem. And the thing is when they come back up, they have, you know, the intelligence, the military gear, all that. Intelligence agencies obviously are going to get hit. The Pentagon would get nuked. The White House would get nuked. You know, Washington is pretty much a city you don't want to be in. Yeah, so it's if you're near any of those things. So the exact coordinates to every warhead, what's priority over the next place, it's hard to say. And you have to understand, when the mad scenario takes place, like if it's a war between Russia and the United States, it also includes China, India, Pakistan, Israel. Everybody with nukes is going to launch. And yes, the mad scenario, a lot of people still contest me on it, but the mad scenario is, yes, allies will fire, you know, a limited amount of nukes, maybe one nuke each. The idea is nobody gets the upper hand after a thermonuclear war. But however, what the Russians have been doing, and so I can imagine the U.S. has also got a, well, it's hard to say with who they have in power now. Their strategies don't seem to be, but then again, the strategies, you know, are they going exactly according to plan? That's the thing. I don't think they are. But again, the Russians and the Chinese have been, you know, putting stuff in their doomsday tunnels. Now the Americans have that big 1,400-mile underground tunnel, was 1,400 miles of tunnel in the mid-USA, and that thing has been extremely active, truck after truck after truck going in there, hauling in God knows what. So I can imagine they got the same thing. So after the nuclear war, when all the nuclear weapons are expended, they saved just enough nuclear weapons to probably do it again. And, you know, after the submarines are coming up, and the Ohio-class submarines fire all their missiles, the new Bory-class and Typhoon submarines fire all their missiles, at that point, everything's pretty much game over and destroyed. God have mercy on our souls. That said, if you're not in your bunker by that time, and the world elites will be in their bunkers, like 9/11, they're going to get the heads up, because the person who launches is going to give their people the heads up just before the launch. Not the civilians, but the people that they want to survive. World elites, etc. So if you see the world elites heading to their bunkers or just disappearing a week before or something like that, and the problem is that they're doing this now, like a lot of them are probably, a lot of these people aren't home anymore. They know that we're getting close to that, 12 o'clock. They know we're getting close to it. But yeah, a no-fly zone in Syria doesn't necessarily mean that's the trigger of it. It's a stepping stone. I think the trigger of it is the byproduct of a no-fly zone in Syria, where we shoot down a Russian airplane. In response, they shoot down 20 NATO airplanes, and they'll do that. They're going to take it to that level, and because they've already done that. You killed so many of our guys here. We hit your intelligence officers right away, not even a couple of days after, in response. So the Russians are going tit for tat, force meets force. But the Russians are going to take it to the, they will call the bluff. At a time when there's no dialogue, at least during the Cuban Missile Crisis, you had dialogue between the two presidents, right? We don't have that right now. We don't have that. And that is so dangerous, so dangerous. And all we have is war hawk after war hawk in Washington. Like, these people are lunatics. If there was ever a time for the military to step up and remove people, it's now. It's now. Like, it's just getting way too, like, and anybody that thinks I'm like fear-mongering or sensationalizing, if you've been following my channel, you know, say from around 2010 when I started doing, 2009, 2010 when I started doing World War III updates, the stuff I was talking about back then, some of it you're seeing now, but the crazy stuff I'm talking about now, you couldn't imagine back then. So that's how much it's escalated. Like people, again, you know, the Super Bowl's on or whatever, the hockey games are now on, King Kardashian's butt got hijacked. I don't know, whatever, that type of thing. It's like, it's just, people are so distracted. Now, there's a lot of my friends and stuff like that, and I only add people that I know to my Facebook. It's nothing personal, it's just, I protect my family because I have family on there and stuff like that. So, the thing is that a lot of them, they know I do the World War III updates. They think I'm nuts anyway. But they don't want to know. Like, they know what I talk about is scary stuff. They don't want to know. But I know that they know, and I can just tell by the way they treat me that, you know, they want to ask me about it, or, you know, is it, what is it that you do? You're crazy, right? You know, you're nuts, right? You're having mental breakdown, right? And I was like, no, you know. Like, I know they want to confirm that, okay, no, that I'm just crazy. You know, they want to do that because the alternative is terrifying, right? And I get that. And I get that. And I get it with the mainstream medias, too. It's like, I talked about the guy in the tinfoil hat over here going, blah, blah, blah. Mainstream media, he's nuts, don't worry about him. He's just a lunatic. And then it's, blah, blah, blah. Well, he's right, but there's nothing to worry about. And then it's like, oh my God, he's right, we're all going to die. But it's only official until the mainstream, it's not official until the mainstream media. And the mainstream media, it's when they keep repeating what I've said 5 months or 8 months ago. They're talking about it now. And I got like no budget. What's their excuse? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah. You know, like, so if you're relying on the mainstream media to tell you when to panic, you know, I think you're going to get it. Yeah, 3 weeks, 8 months after World War III, mainstream media, and it looks like a war has just broken out. World War III has just broken out 8 months ago. It's like, yeah, good job, yeah. Bye. But anyway, yeah. So where the nukes are going to rain down, when they're going to rain down, I don't know. But the stepping stones are there. Everything is a deterioration, just like before World War II. The problem is where World War II finished, that's where it's going to pick up for World War III. And that's the terrifying. And the people in power in Washington are just utter lunatics. It's to the point where they have to be removed, go to jail, some of them. You know, with their day in court, we have to restore rule of law because right now it's clear that there is no rule of law. That, okay, you can be a weapons dealer and we're going to send in guys to assassinate you because you're a terrorist. But if you're the right weapons dealer, we're going to make sure that you know, the Department of Justice drops the charges because you'll incriminate the government. I think that's self-explanatory what's wrong with that right there. That tells you that that government is now nil and void, that government needs to be replaced. I'd like to see it done peacefully. I don't think it's going to happen peacefully. I do believe there will be a U.S. military coup in the United States. But you see, the United States is also trying to get a flash war going on, flash in the pan incident, so that the miscalculation happens, two warships sink each other. Oh my God, we're at war, we don't have time to think about it, just pick up the rifle and fight. You know what I mean? War. Because that's what happened. But people are a lot more savvy now, that they understand that we fell for it in Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, never happened. And 58,000 men died for that, and 1 million Viet Cong. Again, the Viet Cong, sure, they weren't saints, there's no doubt about that. They still aren't. But the thing is that was their country. Why the hell did they even go into that country? There was no need to go into that country. Iraq, same thing. Saddam's weapon of mass destruction. There was none. And when they did find chemical weapons and stuff in Iraq, they were American-made. The ones that were given to Saddam in 48. You know what I mean? That type of stuff. So it's like, it's really, people are starting to say, okay, you're going to tell us that we have to comply to a draft or we're traitors and cowards. Meanwhile, you're purposely starting a war. At that point, if you're a military general, you got to, I hope there's a few good ones, not just following orders. Yes, I know there's been a military purge for yes men, and I get that. And Petraeus, well, he seems to be pretty, pretty useless, I guess is an understatement. And again, a traitor to the country. You just follow what these people do. But I hope there's other guys, generals in there, and that probably isn't because they've been removed, but hopefully those retired generals have already got the go-to guys to take care of the problem when it's like, okay, they're going to put us into a war. We have to, or we're going to all die. I hope that some of these military commanders realize that the Russians love their children too, and hopefully they love their children and their countrymen too, because at some point, once those missiles fly, we can't call them back. And I know they don't care about us, but it's like if you're the guy who has to launch the missile, you should be questioning that order ahead of time, not when you. Because when it comes out to do it, well, once they're launching, then you have to launch, right? I could see the ultimate thing, what the Russians could do, and trust me, they would really well prepare for this to be able to pull it off. They would save their military for sure, and I'll just finish up with this. But if they could get the United States to launch nuclear weapons against Russia, and they don't fire back, think about that. Just think about that. Just think of the implications of that. That would completely destroy the United States. People would just completely freak out. You launched on a country that did nothing. And then of course, they would have everything. It would be a con, don't get me wrong, it would be a con, but the Russians could play that game too. And then of course, they would come in on the sweep up after. You wouldn't realize it was a con until, the Red Dawn would happen, weeks after, because they wouldn't be ready for it. They wouldn't be ready for it. But anyway, that's just my take on what most likely will happen when it happens. Put food and water away. We're living in dangerous times. We have lunatics at the helm. Patients are running the asylum. If you think it's fear-mongering, then you got nothing to worry about. But if you can understand what I'm looking at, again, if you follow this channel long enough, you know that a lot of times I'm not wrong. It's just I don't know when I'm going to be right. So it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So anyway, next time, if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. Thank you so much to everybody who has. Next time, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourselves, be true to others. Always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Good day, hi, and welcome. Very blustery out there. It's really raining. And yes, I know the camera lighting isn't the best. But anyway, question I get time and time again is when do you think World War III is going to kick off as a recognizable hot war? I get that one all the time. Official answer is I don't know. A lot of people say, well, okay, right now there's people saying, oh, we're going to have thermonuclear war by October 8th. Well, we're the 7th, so that means tomorrow. So hopefully you get to see this video. I don't do dates and times because it's not that cut and dry. There's a lot of things that are happening. It's going to happen when it happens. There's a lot of people that don't believe it's going to happen at all. And a lot of people that watch, like, Reg, I watch and I like what you have to say. And I've heard this several times from several different people. And I find it interesting, but I don't think it'll ever, that, they'll always say, and I know that they're never going to do it. Cooler heads are going to prevail. But then again, when you look at the lunatics out there, you just have to take a few things into consideration. Number one, how psychopathic they are. Number two, their understanding of thermonuclear weapons is completely, it's delusions of grandeur. They think, okay, yeah, you see a mushroom cloud, you've got victory. They don't understand the devastation after. And really, we have a good idea what will happen in a thermonuclear war, but we don't really know what the true after effects are. Like, we have an idea from Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but we don't know, like, how fast it will kill off biodiversity in all areas. So even areas that are not irradiated might still suffer just from whatever. And radiation is cumulative, so that means it's going to be transferred by the weather, it's going to be transferred by animals, it's going to be transferred by all kinds of stuff. We know things will survive, but it's going to be a unique existence for a lot that does. But the thing is that, yes, these people are crazy enough, I think they would do it. They are genocidal enough, they will do it. Because this idea, like right now what you're seeing isn't a miscalculation. These people are pushing, like John Kerry and all these generals. And, I mean, you have generals in the United States that are, some are, you have that Kennedy guy or whatever. Yeah, he can't wait. This guy's frothing at the mouth to go to war with Russia. These are the type of people that call you coward if you don't want to go and die for these bankers' wars. They're real idiots. I get it. Some of them are that hardcore that they, war is what they want. They're, and you have to look at how often the United States goes to war. It's at war all the time. It's been at war steadily since World War II. It pretty much never stops. And definitely since Vietnam, it's been nonstop whatsoever. There's been no stop whatsoever. So people looking at this, you have to understand their willingness to go to war is not even in question. They have a death and debt-based economy in the States. Take the democracy JDAMs, take our currency or you get democracy JDAMs and regime change and all that stuff. So that's pretty much self-evident. You don't even have to go too much into depth on that one. So the willingness to get into war is not even questioned. The United States is always looking for war. That's why they're in Syria. That's why they're in Libya. They went looking for it. Nobody called them to come over. They just went looking for it. The Ukraine, that type of thing, they're not really in there yet, but they're getting in there, that type of thing. Iraq, again, nobody was calling to go to war with Iraq other than the government. The civilians weren't saying we have to go to war with Iraq. They went along with it because they got duped into it with weapons of mass destruction. And somehow, bin Laden who escaped to Pakistan, but we're going to go to war in Iraq, that type of thing. But anyway, I digress. But all those lies are getting exposed now, and it's getting to the point where it's just the emperor has no clothes. People see it for what it is. And they're getting more desperate. They're talking about a no-fly zone in Syria, which means they're going to be trying to shoot down Russian airplanes. The Russians have already responded saying, we're not going to tolerate U.S. mistakes. If you come in to strike us, if we don't know where those bombs are going to be falling, we're going to take you out. And we're not going to, once those missiles are fired, we ain't calling them back. So the Russians have pretty much, they've drawn their line in the sand, and they will shoot down NATO airplanes. I think they're going to do it on purpose. They're going to probably even pick an incident where the NATO airplane is just innocently flying and it has no threat to them whatsoever, and they're going to shoot it down on purpose. Say, well, you were too close to our area, and we thought you were attacking. Even if it's going to be bullshit, they're going to do it to call the bluff. That's what the Russians do. They again, that win big, lose big. Like I say, the Chinese, if they take a gamble, it's usually 50-50. If they win everything. If they don't win, well, they don't lose much. With the Russians, it's different. If they take that same gamble, if they win the table. If they lose an arm. That type of thing. So the Russians will Putin will play the crazy man at some point to get the world's attention. And trust me, one thing you won't get with Russia is, you got the odd guy that's the Yahoo out there that, we're going to kick Russia's ass so fast, like this general, and I bet you this guy, granted, I'm not a soldier, I never served, but I bet you this guy's never saw combat, you know what I mean? So he probably doesn't even understand that it's not that cut and dry. You don't just come in and kick everybody's ass, you get your ass kicked too. Again, nobody thought, the Syrian regime would have fell without the Russian help, but they're hanging on pretty darn well. Think about the weaponry that's being used in Syria. It's American-made anti-tank weapons. Yes, the training isn't as good for the jihadis. Yes, the Americans and the Egyptians and the Qataris and the Mossad and the Israelis and the U.S. is all training up these jihadists to use these weapons properly. But even at that, which these TOW missiles are more advanced than the anti-tank missiles that the Syrians are using for the most part. They do have a handful of Hornets, but for the most part they're using RPG-7s and stuff like that. They're still riding around predominantly in T-55 and T-72 tanks, and the older versions of them. They're not in the fully modernized versions of them, which I don't think there's any real modernized T-55s, but you get the idea. So the Syrian army is still going around with 1950s, 1960s, 1970s technology, and up against state-of-the-art anti-tank weapons and stuff like that, and they're still making, their tactics are still, don't kid yourself, the Syrians are taking massive losses, but Aleppo is going to fall into the hands of the Syrian Arab Army. There's no doubt about that. And the United States is looking at this, and the world bankers are looking at this. If Aleppo Aleppo's already fallen, but if Aleppo is retaken, it's pretty much game over in Syria because there's no place for the rebels to really be of any effect. At that point, the Syrian army will just go from town to town and clear them out. I think Bashar al-Assad was right. The victory in Syria is only a few months away. They just can't. The rebels can't hang on, and those guys are going to flood back into Israel. They're going to flood back into Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and they're just going to destabilize there. Why? Mercenaries get cranky when you don't pay them.